Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the new home of power mining analysis. In today's episode, Anthony Power and I have a stacked agenda. We're obviously going to be covering the price action we've seen in Bitcoin over the weekend and the corresponding impact it's having to the Bitcoin mining stocks. In today's session, we're seeing a number of the miners we cover on the channel having a very strong start to the week. On top of that, we just got Q1 earnings out from Bitdeer, so we're going to be dissecting that. And finally, you guys, Bitfarms. So we just got an update on the CEO hunt, the outgoing of Geoff Morphy, and a slight delay on their earnings, which are now going to be filed on Wednesday. So a lot to go through in today's video. Before we do though, please take a second, smash the like button, you guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join. And let us know in the comment section below what you thought about this announcement from Bitfarms, your outlook on the sector overall, and your thoughts on Bitcoin mining in terms of the long-term future of this industry. Now, with that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, so that's right. Today's video, a jam-packed agenda. Obviously the price of Bitcoin very strong over the weekend. We're seeing green shoots across the board. But Anthony, one of the companies struggling today is obviously Bitfarms in the red, and that's because of some big news that came out this morning in relation to not only their earnings, but their outgoing CEO, Geoff Morphy, as well. So we want to get into that news today. We also got Q1 high-level results from Bitdeer. So we're going to have them on the channel later to discuss those results, but we wanted to get an initial reaction from Anthony on that and then dissect exactly what's going on in this Bitcoin market. So Anthony, why don't we start off with the Bitfarms news, because that's obviously the big one. We were supposed to have Ben on today for an interview. That's been pushed back a couple days as they delayed earnings till the 15th. But why don't you give us your thoughts on today's action from Bitfarms?
Yeah, I mean, this is, some of it's actually not news. I mean, go back to March the 25th. Bitfarms actually put out an update to say that Geoff Morphy, the president and the CEO, and also director of the company, would be departing on completion of a search for a new CEO, and he would be sort of handling, company affairs as he has done for the last few years, focusing on the corporate growth, ensuring execution taking place and the smooth transition. And so, that was news, literally 6 weeks ago. So, and then there was speculation about who they're going to bring in, how long it was going to take. I got to see Geoff Morphy in London, had a chat with him. And he sort of, the impression I got was it wasn't, from that conversation, it wasn't his choice to do it. And so, that conversation stayed with me. But today, obviously the company have made an announcement, and they've actually terminated his role with immediate effect. And from what the company has said, he's filed a lawsuit against the company for breach of contract and wrongful dismissal for a total of just under $27 million. Now, with him going, they haven't got an immediate CEO in place. So Nicholas Bonta, the chairman and co-founder, he's been appointed as the interim president and CEO while this search for the new CEO nears its completion. And they're expecting to make an appointment in the next few weeks. And so, that's the news in a nutshell. Obviously today, we were all lined up to interview Ben Gagnon, and the results were going to come out today. But they put out a second SEC filing literally after the first one to say that because of obviously what's happening today, the earnings report due on the 13th has now been moved to Wednesday the 15th of May, and that'll be issued prior to the market opening. Yeah, and just to go one step further, obviously you've already articulated to the market wasn't totally happy with that response, and the share price reflected that on the opening.
That's what I was going to say, Anthony. We talked just yesterday or in our last podcast about Wall Street, specifically the big money not liking uncertainty. And say what you want about either the new CEO or the old CEO, but definitely not the ideal timing for Bitfarms, just going through the halving and now having to deal not only with the internal search for the CEO, but now also the legal fallout, whether they win or lose that lawsuit. Definitely not attention that you need or want to be spending right now as you're trying to ramp up in South America. Now, where do you think this leaves Bitfarms, Anthony? Because we just talked in our Q&A session about how rosy the outlook was for Bitfarms this year. They've obviously got a tremendous amount of growth on the horizon, a very strong operator, some of the best management and experience in the league right now. Where do you think this leaves Bitfarms in terms of performance and these exahash targets for 2024?
From a performance position, no one can challenge Bitfarms in terms of what they do on a month-by-month basis. They're generally in the either top or in the top two month in, month out in terms of what they can get from their mining machines, and that. It is Bitfarms' team. You've got the Chief Mining Officer Ben Gagnon, who has responsibility for operational requirements for the company. That's going to continue there. Obviously, Jeff had a large financial background and has steered the company amazingly to where they are now. They've got zero debt, no debt on the balance sheet. They had $160 million of debt 20 months ago. So, and they weren't the only miners to have a lot of debt at that period in time. There's 3 or 4 miners with, over 100 million in debt, and Bitfarms are one of the few miners to sort of like realize probably at the opportune time to make that choice. I think if they delayed it any further, it'd have been a problem. They made some really, really big decisions to get that debt down. Selling machines that hadn't even opened. The boxes were there, ready to upload onto their sites, and they made decision to sell those machines, get the debt down, reduce it, kept the market informed of every time they were looking to reduce that debt, and they came to that plan perfectly. I mean, it ended in February. We knew in October, in September last year, it was going to end in February, and they stuck to that plan. So, Jeff takes a lot of credit for that. He's the CEO. He's the one that's responsible for all these updates. He's the one that gives out, make sure the ship's being steered in the right way. We don't know any more at the moment, and we're not here on this channel here to speculate as to what's going on. That might come out later on there. It was a surprise to me when it was initially announced. I've met Jeff a couple of times, very personable. Listened to him speak on a number of panels as well, and he knows his stuff. I mean, his background is very extensive, and that's what you need in these companies. He's not someone that's young coming into this space. He's been around in the markets for a long time, so he understands the market size. And actually, sometimes you need that experience in some of these companies. So, we'll hear in the future, and when we do hear, we can discuss it then. But at the moment, I'm not going to speculate on why. The other part of it, yes, they've got a temporary CEO. It's the current chairman of the company, so and the co-founder, and that'll just be for a couple of weeks. So they've obviously got their eye on somebody. If they're about to say they're going to announce the next 2 weeks, they've got a very short list now of people to look at. There's been a lot of speculation about Ben's name being included in that list. I mean, Ben's, as a chief mining officer, what he knows is technically he's gifted. He's been around machines all his life. But CEO of a company needs more than just that. You've got to have a lot more skill set than that. And it would come as a surprise if Ben was appointed as CEO. I think there'll be people out there. I look to the likes of, the appointment of Adam Sullivan at Core Scientific when they were going through their financial woes in Chapter 11, and how that appointment's turned that company around. That, all we can see is sort of like, green shoots on a daily basis coming out from there. They need an Adam Sullivan equivalent to go into Bitfarms and keep the ship sailing. And they've got a task this year now. So, they've got a really important growth strategy to complete. This is not a couple of exahash. They're at 7 at the moment. They've got to get to 21. And they've got 7 months to do it, a little over 7 months. Now, by the end of May, we're hoping that they get to, I think 9 exahash is the target that we're seeing on some of the updates there, I believe. We're going to have to start seeing 2 every month, effectively, to get to that position. They've got to go 14 exahash, 7 months to do it. even you, Bryce, could calculate that's about two a month for the rest of the year. So there's going to have to be some really big, energization updates. And, we said this before, we'll probably do another podcast the next week or so as to some of these miners who've put some of these big updates out and how we feel based on, not just based on our view, but based on the track record. I mean, we've talked about mining companies putting out growth targets. Marathon had a growth target of 23 exahash 2 years ago, and it was achieved, this year. And so, CleanSpark didn't achieve their target last year. They did the previous year. They got to the 6 exahash, but they had an ambitious target initially to 22 exahash. Then it went down to 20. Then it went down to 16. Then the 16 went down to 10 because they needed a few more weeks, and they achieved it. They achieved the 16 in sort of February. So it wasn't too many 6 weeks after but that target had come down by 6 exahash. So who's going to be the first mine to come out and say, you know what, we're not going to quite make it, and put out an update? When did they put the update out to say they're not going to achieve it? CleanSpark put their first update out very early on in 2023, say they're not going to get to 2022. The second update came out not long after that, so they had a good 9 months of the year then focusing on 16 exahash, and I think there were some issues with one of the sites in terms of energization, and it took a little bit longer than they expected. And Matthew had articulated, this sort of towards the end of the year, saying, look, we were planning to get to 16 by December 31st. We're going to get there in February. And I think people sort of saw that as a positive thing. It was there and thereabouts. And, if you think about the timing of October last year to where they are in February and March in terms of market capitalization, it works in their favor that time. But we've got about 5 miners now who've got some massive targets, and literally all of them are going to have to achieve a couple of exahash a month to do it. And so we'll probably have a podcast based on those. I think it'd be a good one. Get some, comments in from the followers to sort of get their views on it as well. Maybe do a live one on it. I think to get that interaction with people, that'd be a good time to do it the next week or so, and then we'll just see who actually is the first one to sort of hit the sort of dial, say we're not going to quite get there.
I think that'd be a great idea, Anthony. Bet on the horse type of podcast where you pick your winner for the year. And you're right, these companies have set out aggressive growth targets. We just heard Rob Chang from Gryphon saying the 10 exahash is definitely an aggressive target. So it's going to be similar story to what we're seeing with FASB and all of these beneficial things coming into the market, Anthony, the purchase orders, the option orders, the exahash announcements. It's great to make all of these announcements, but actually achieving them is another thing.
In fairness to Rob and to Gryphon, I think he says it's a target. It's a target for people to go to the moon and whatever like that. They'd like to see it happen. That he accepts it's unlikely, but he's basically setting the target out there, and he's going to be actively looking at the M&A side of it. That's the only way they can grow. They haven't got the capital to raise to get those machines themselves. So they're going to have to look at how they, if there's any companies out there that have value to merge, and then Gryphon becomes a bigger company, and that opens doors for them there as well. So it's a lot of moving parts to get to any growth. But I mean, he actually said if he got to 5 or 6, that would be a fantastic achievement. I mean, if they got to treble their current hash rate, that would be a fantastic achievement in 1 year. Not many miners can treble the hash rate in 1 year. But to 10x it, that's going at full tilt. And so we'll see how we get Rob on quite regularly onto the channel. So I'm sure as soon as he's got the stuff to ready announce, he'll want to come on and explain that. But he was at the same time of putting that 10x out, he was sort of saying, look guys, 5 and 6 would be fantastic.
And I agree, it would be, right?
It's like anything. You set yourself a big target so that you don't take the foot off the gas yourself. You don't sort of think, I'm nearly getting to 5 or 6, I'm going to stop now. He set himself a target that's probably unlikely, but it keeps him motivated to keep, focusing on driving more exahash. That's probably the best way to explain it.
It's the analogy I like to say is shoot for the moon, land among the stars. Even if you get to 9 or 8x or 7x, that's huge. And I'm wondering, Anthony, if any of these other companies, because Rob was kind of the only one who laid it out in that framework. I wonder if these other companies are thinking, hey, 50 exahash is an optimistic goal. we'll be happy with 40 or whatever the case. What I was going to say though is you're exactly right, Anthony. This year for Bitfarms, same with Riot, it's about execution. So they should be very happy they still have Ben there to keep an eye on these machines and make sure this operational side of the business keeps humming as well as it has been while they worry about the financial and the CEO search. So really interesting dynamic.
One thing I wanted to add there is, Ben is a chief mining officer, so he's an officer of a company. There's not many other chief mining officers. In fact, only last week, Taylor Moonig from CleanSpark was made an officer of his company as well. So, he's now sort of like, in terms of responsibility and he's sort of like on that same par level with Ben now. And probably, if you think about the mining officers across the board, they're probably two that all the other mining companies would be offering jobs if it became available, without a doubt. I'm sure Ben's had umpteen informal requests from other companies to come and get their sort of like position sorted out. And if you think about, the last 2 or 3 years 3.5 years in this space, every month it's a battle between Bitfarms and Hive Digital who's going to finish top. So you've got two of the sort of like oldest public miners still producing great numbers on a monthly basis. Not the biggest hash rates of all the companies. In fact, with Bitfarms at 7, Hive at 5 now, but still able to get significant results. And both of those companies have got sites in different continents. So it's like, it's not like they're all in one place where it's probably a lot easier to focus on. I think Bitfarms have got 11 sites. Hive are in 3 different countries. They're in Canada, they're in Iceland, they're in Sweden. So there's a lot of moving parts in there. But every month, first or second is them there. Very rare they don't take top spot. And when it does, it makes it opens your eyesight as to how another company can beat them, because they do contest that position month in, month out.
Yeah, they've really spread their eggs out, so to speak, Anthony. The other point I was going to make there, it's going to be really interesting to see how the results play out based on this activity at the start of the year here, Anthony. And speaking of results, we've reached out to Ben. We're going to try and get him back on the podcast later this week to go through those earnings that are now coming out on the 15th. So it will be quite a week for Bitfarms, and we'll keep you guys posted as much as possible as that CEO hunt continues. So next up, you guys, we want to shift gears a little bit. We want to talk about Bitcoin price. Obviously, a very tumultuous trading session over the last couple of months. We've seen halving, we've seen runes, transaction fees all over the map, but Bitcoin seems to be stabilizing a bit, Anthony. It's creeping back up in the low 60s there. Obviously, that's giving a lot of strength to the Bitcoin mining sector. And what I said to you the other day, Anthony, is the analogy of working out. It seems like Bitcoin, we've got the ETFs, we've got the Hong Kong ETF, we've got the halving. There's all these positive catalysts, but just like going to the gym and working out and eating well and sleep and all the rest, it takes a while for this stuff to work itself through. And to me, it really feels like we're getting close. We've had consolidation now for months and months. We've got a lot of these bullish factors coming in, really hindering the supply of Bitcoin and increasing the demand. It feels like we're getting close to that takeoff point, Anthony, for me. Do you think we're creeping back up, or do you think there's still some more pain to come?
I don't know. I mean, and the thing that is apparent is this last sort of 1.5 months now, we've been in that sort of 60, 65 bracket. So we seem to be holding 60,000 really well. I'm not a technical expert. I don't possess to be. I look at the fundamentals, and you're quite right. The ETFs have done amazingly for Bitcoin price this year. I mean, they've achieved, what gold took 2 years to do in the space of a few months. And now that Hong Kong has opened up, and there'll be more ETFs around the world. Frankfurt opened up a couple of weeks ago as well. Maybe when we get the UK on board, I don't know. It's surprising me. We look at ourselves as technologically gifted, but and we want to be at the forefront of all this. That Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, is always creating that. But for some reason, they're not fully behind Bitcoin at the moment, and regulations are impacting people buying Bitcoin from their bank accounts, and so there's issues in the UK that, but it just takes more and more adoption. There'll be more pressure because people just be voting with how to do this in another way. People find out a way to do it, and there'll be no stopping them. But adoption at the moment is going great. I think the cycles show that post the halving, there's generally a really good spike after Bitcoin. So again, we're getting close to a month after halving. So in that sort of 2, 3, 4 months after halving, in the previous cycles, we've seen this amazing spike. And if you listen to the likes of Mike Alford, who's on Spaces quite regularly, and also a director of IREN, he's been investing for 25 years. He's got a sort of like a good understanding of the space, and he believes that we're in a good place at the moment, and the price of Bitcoin now is always a good time to buy from his perspective, because he sees it as the bull cycle going significantly higher. And to be honest with you, in fairness to him, he's been pretty much right the last sort of 18 months since I've been sort of watching what he's been coming out with. So, credit to him. But he's got a lot more experience in this space. He's got a lot of investments in this technological space, and he talks the case up really well. We look at fundamental side of things, so that, and actually, in hindsight, it sort of backs up a lot of it, and we're seeing that now. The valuations. The market still doesn't seem to appreciate some of the mining companies from a value perspective, and we covered this in the live podcast when we looked at sort of like the 5 companies that put their results out last week, and when you try to look at the valuations compared to the premium that's applied to certain stocks like CleanSpark and Marathon, it just beggars belief. I mean. Only on Saturday, I think it was, when we had a sort of like a big Spaces meeting as the Bitcoin mining guy, and we were talking about valuations there, and I highlighted that for every exahash of CleanSpark, it had a cost value of about $180 million, and for every exahash of IREN, had a valuation of about $40 million, which effectively says is the market sees IREN as the cost of their exahash is 4 times cheaper. It's just beggars belief as to how the market does that. And then you go into the fact that IREN have started to do high performance computing, which is a separate business. And yes, it's small at the moment, but it's going to be a growing business. And there's no recognition of any of that. And there's no recognition in some of the other miners for some other businesses as well. So maybe it's still the infancy, and these stocks need to mature a bit longer. It is. I think the difficulty is because of Bitcoin's volatility, the mining stocks volatility. If you start looking at quarterly updates in isolation, it doesn't paint a great picture. I mean, 2023, even though the Bitcoin price rallied 155% last year, not many mining companies were making profits in those quarters. Now, in 2024, in that first 3 months, irrespective of which quarterly period, it's still the same period from a calendar point of view. All the results that have come out so far have effectively showed, good net income, good net profits for these companies, and that's because we had a significant rise in the Bitcoin price in those 3 months. I mean, at the start of the year, it's 42,000. End of March, the end of the reporting period, it was 71,000. So those companies that had the HODL were able to report their Bitcoin on the balance sheet around about the 70,000 mark. That makes a massive difference. I mean, just to categorize Marathon, they were able to add over 500 million in unrealized gains to their position just based on Bitcoin, on what they held, irrespective of what they operated at, which wasn't fantastic in the quarter. Once you take out that unrealized gain from their position, some of the results weren't looking as rosy as they expected. Now this week, and we'll come onto one company in a second, you're going to get quite a few companies this week who are issuing their results that haven't got any Bitcoin HODL. So it's going to be interesting to see. Only one last week, Core Scientific issued their numbers without HODL, and Core Scientific numbers were probably the best of the 5 issued in terms of cash flow, free cash flow, in terms of net income. And bear in mind, they've got no HODL, so no unrealized gains. So what you see is what you get. And And the very positive things, remember, they're able to reduce debt down as well in the quarter. They reduced that by 19 million there. And all this, having spent the first part of the quarterly period still in Chapter 11, so they were still, undetermined whether they were going to come out or not, and they came out sort of, I think it was the 12th of January, but a very positive month, and that's sort of like that gives you an indication that they're not going to benefit from any FASB rules going forward because they're not going to hodl. They've got a requirement to sell Bitcoin within 10 days, and they probably sell it on a daily basis. And so if you look at, take April, for instance, they sold regular Bitcoin on a daily basis. They probably achieved an average price of 66,000 for their Bitcoin, where the miners who hodled could only book 61,000 per Bitcoin for that period, because that's what the value was at the end of the month. And if the Bitcoin price stays at 62,000 by the end of June, then those companies that had, great unrealized gains will have some of that taken away if you look at it from a 6-month perspective, because the Bitcoin price again drops down from 70,000. So unless it achieves that level of 70,000, you have this sort of volatility in quarterly updates. And I think that's where there's probably an issue with how the markets are perceiving these mining stocks and whether they feel that there's any benefit. And so, that's just my view at the moment. It's not, I just from what I see, but I think it's it's a fairly sensible view.
Well, and Anthony, what I was going to add about those lumpy quarters, we've talked before about how investable these companies are to pension funds and big banks and hedge funds. The inconsistent quarters, because of that underlying asset volatility, definitely is a red flag for a lot of these companies. But as you say, it's expected in a very infant industry like this, and that should normalize as more people get involved with the market itself. Bitcoin, there's more liquidity, more volume, and obviously the price fluctuation should hopefully flatten out. But very interesting, just as we're talking here, Bitcoin has ticked up over 63,000, so we'll continue to follow that one. But you're right, Anthony, there's a lot going on under the surface here it feels like, and at some point we're going to get a move in some direction. It's just going to be a matter of time here. Interesting to watch. Now, you did bring up a very astute point, Anthony. This week, we've got a lot of non-hodlers. So we've got a lot of the people that are going to be selling Bitcoin or companies on a daily basis. One of those is actually Bitdeer. They just came out today. Now, this company we've talked a lot about during the quarter in relation to their seal miner, some of their fully vertically integrated approach and strategy now. What did you think of high-level earnings from Bitdeer, at least?
So if you look at the high level, they made a net profit. Not a massive amount. It was only $606,000, but it's still a net profit. They don't hodl any Bitcoin, so they don't have any benefit from any unrealized gains on their balance sheet. In terms of revenues, 120 million, rounding up to 120 million, 119.5 million in terms of revenues for the quarter. So only the likes of Core Scientific and Marathon could compete with them in that sort of instance there. And basically, we said this before, Bitdeer, when you look at self-mining, it's actually quite a small part of their business. They only mined, they mined less Bitcoin than Cypher did, and Cypher achieved 48 million from their self-mining. So you can understand when you look at the self-mining as a proportion of the whole business, for Bitdeer, it's probably about 40%. And actually, as we go forward, we'll see some obviously changes to that next year when they start opening these big sites that they've got planned, because most of their growth will occur. I think they've got about 3 exahash to grow this year, but most of their growth is in 2025 when they start opening the sites in Bhutan, in Norway, in Ohio, and we're talking a massive amount of megawatts, well over 1 gigawatts in total will be under their auspices by the time they've got these sites underway. And so for this quarter, there were some things that made the numbers probably less than people expected. And one of those factors that was apparent to me was the amount they've spent in this quarter relating to research and development. So $21 million was spent in relation to that there, and we'll get more from when we have our update. We're having an update live podcast this week with Bitdeer, so we'll get questions to them about that. We know that in terms of research and development, they've highlighted the fact that the Seal Miner A1 machine has been developed and is looking now to go to production, to start applying to their self hash rate in their own facilities. And should the opportunity arise, if the price of mining machines increases, it gives them a sort of like an extra revenue stream to consider. So that was the one additional cost that probably they have had research and development expenses in previous periods. I mean, bear in mind, this company have as many people in research and development that Marathon Digital have an employee. So there's over 50 people in research and development working at Bitdeer. So that's quite a significant team. And when you consider that self-mining at the moment only represents about 40% of the business, the research and development are covering some of those other areas. And that's only going to get bigger as they go along, because if they start obviously expanding the sales of mining machines, that will be a potentially a really good revenue driver for them. So in terms of, like I explained about the revenue there, gross profit was 34 million. So again, it wasn't, it was probably lower than expected, but in their cost of revenue, they do include other costs, and we'll probably bring that up when we have the chat with Bitdeer themselves. I just want to go through some of the high level numbers here. In terms of stock compensation, they had a figure of 7.8 million. So of the sort of like 6 companies that have released their numbers up to now, not certainly the lowest of the 5 that included stock compensation in there. Depreciation was 18 million. So if you look at the fact that had a net income of 606,000, they've accounted for depreciation of 18 million. They've got stock compensation of nearly 8 million there. That's getting on for 27 million in sort of what I would say as cash flow from their business. So basically, if you look at all the money coming in terms of cash, all the costs going out in terms of cash, that's effectively giving them 27 million net position there. So that's from a company perspective, that's positive. They've articulated that their cost of energy for the first quarter averaged at about 4.3 cents a kilowatt hour. So that's with mining efficiency of just over 31 joules per terahash. So not the greatest efficiency of miners compared to their peer group. We know that's going to change because they're bringing in all new miners to grow from their current self-mining hash rate, which is about 6.7, all the way up to sort of like 25 and then up to 43 in terms of longer term growth there. So there'll be a lot more new machines coming in that will drive that efficiency down, make it cheaper going forward there. So they've got a lot of potential upside as new machines start to come in, to replace some of these older machines, because at 31, with the average being about 35, you can sort of understand that, that they've got probably an older fleet. We look at the likes of Core Scientific, CleanSpark, Marathon, Riot, all around 24, 25. Bitfarms, their efficiency came down to 31 in April from 35 in previous months. So they managed to drop their efficiency by 4 by replacing some of the machines and installing some new machines to get to 7 exahash. And they've got a target now to get that down to well below 24 by the end of the year. And you'll see the same with the likes of Bitdeer as well. So it might not look great at the moment, but still, if they're averaging 4.3 cents, that's not such a bad figure. I mean, some of the other miners that I've already highlighted are also around that figure as well. So it's not excessive. It's not excessive. We talk about 4 to 5 cents is where you need to be. Anything more than 5 cents at the moment is probably going to be causing a problem if you haven't got the most efficient miners out there to make a profit with the hash price where it is at the moment, which is probably around the $50 per petahash per day.
Yeah, it's pretty good numbers, I thought, Anthony. And I mentioned this in our last video, but I really do think they're putting a lot of these companies understand Q1 is going to be very strong. They're putting a lot of these expenses into Q1. Those kind of R&D costs, I would be surprised if that continues throughout the whole year, Anthony. But obviously with the Seal Miner, some of these big developments up front, obviously a lot of money being put into that channel. So interestingly enough, as we're getting earnings from the Bitcoin miners, we're also getting earnings from all the other companies in the market, and we're starting to see more and more banks showing exposure to the Bitcoin ETFs in their earnings as well. So interesting to see. You guys, if you have more questions, detailed questions for Bitdeer about earnings, feel free to submit them. We have them on this week to talk in depth about these numbers. Now, Anthony, before we wrap up here, I just wanted to kind of go into one other tangent in relation to the political landscape here behind Bitcoin, because a few weeks ago we talked about the Kingdom of Bhutan actually partnering up with Bitdeer. So there's the Bitdeer reference again to mine Bitcoin. Now we're starting to see other nation states get involved, and now we're starting to see political candidates in the United States. I know Donald Trump gave some comments on Bitcoin crypto exposure. So I think this may really start to be a big piece of the equation at a macro level this year as well. The ETFs were kind of the story of the start of 2024. I think the election cycle may be the story towards the end of it. So I just wanted to throw that quickly in there. Anthony, I'll give it back to you for any closing thoughts. Covered a lot of ground today. We have action at Bitfarms. We've got action in Bitcoin price, and obviously some good numbers out of Bitdeer. Anything we missed here?
No. I think those are sort of like the main updates. We covered a lot we had the nearly 90-minute session on the weekend on Saturday, where we were able to cover a lot of topics there and got through all the questions that we were asked there. We've got a big week ahead of us, so it would have been nice to have got Bitdeer's numbers out today to see how they compare as well. But they'll be out on Wednesday morning before market opens. So we'll look at those. IRENs are out this week as well. TeraWulfs are out this week, so we'll get the Wolf Pack howling this week. See if they, but those miners there we just articulated, IREN, TeraWulf, Bitdeer, no Bitcoin hodl. So Bitdeer has showed their hand. They made a net income and it's always good to make a net income. And yes, they had some big costs in there. But if you look at what I think this time last year, their R&D costs were around about 6 million. So that's a significant increase in R&D for them. It's like a 4x from where it was. So we'll certainly get more information around that side. And it's not too difficult for them to explain, because they've been highlighting what they've been doing in terms of this first generation miner, looking at the second generation miner, and putting these patents and all this together. It's these things aren't done on the cheap. It's expensive. So I'm sure that they'll be able to articulate that and give an understanding of what happens for the rest of the year in terms of that sort of cost. Because right, as you rightly say, rewards are half now, so unless the Bitcoin price really spikes, we're going to see some challenging second quarter results in terms of calendar year for that period April to June, when they start appearing in sort of July, August time. That's exactly it, yeah. And yeah, in terms of schedule, Anthony, we've got Bitdeer Wednesday, HUD 8 on Wednesday as well. You guys, Soluna Thursday, and then the Wolf Pack to wrap us up on Friday. Plus, we're going to try and get Bitfarms rebooked in there at some point. So a busy week, a great start to that week. You guys, portfolios should be looking green for the most part here today. And we'll see you tomorrow. Make sure you hit the like button, you guys. Feel free to subscribe and drop any comments below that we may have missed. Have a great day.